Coming up this week on Meeting Minds, I have a wonderful expert who has her background in broadcast, in Broadway, all of these amazing things that we're bringing to life in the world of virtual events. You're not going to want to miss this week's episode of Meeting Minds.
This is Meeting Minds with Charles Ide. Join Charles and his co-host Paige as they chat with leaders in today's events world on how you can take your events to the next level. Broadcasting from the IDECOM studios in Minneapolis, Minnesota, this is Meeting Minds with Charles Ide.
Welcome back, everyone. We're here in the IDECOM studios again. Same shirt, so I'm recording twice today. But I have a fabulous guest that we just couldn't wait any longer to get scheduled. So I have Miss Wendee Lee Curtis, who is both a live and virtual host and MC, previously the traffic and entertainment reporter and weekend anchor at KTNV in Las Vegas. I'm so happy to have her on. We've had a conversation previously, and I want to welcome all of you to meet Miss Wendee Lee Curtis.
Hi, Paige. You're like all the things today. Schedule all the things. It's so nice to meet you. Hey, everybody. How are y'all doing? So yeah, I have I left my heart in Las Vegas. You know, there's this saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But for me, the opposite was true. You know, I really took that Las Vegas experience and I expanded it for myself, both personally and professionally. So, God, that was a mouthful. You really said like all the things.
Well, you did have to work outlining it for me so I could have it right here in front of me. I get the opportunity to introduce you to our guest, and then you can now so for those of you out there, Wendee and I we like to have, before we do a podcast, like a brief little introduction on what we're going to talk about. And Wendee has a phenomenal background, and I would love for you to share your journey through some of your Broadway background and how you got to this world that you're in of being a live and virtual host and MC in this crazy world we're in right now.
Well, serendipity is at the heart of it. I would have to say, I always say that, I trust my life. My life is always really aligned in ways that are synergistic with who I am, like sort of naturally. So I fundamentally trust my life. But greetings from Houston, Texas. I'm down here and the post freeze over. But yeah, I spent, I came out of the womb dancing, since I was 5 years old. I wanted to sing and dance on Broadway. And that was a passion that I never put aside. And I carried it in my heart. And eventually I made my way to New York. And I waited a lot of tables and checked a lot of coats and took a lot of dance classes and a lot of vocal lessons and a lot of acting classes. And I finally landed my first Broadway show called Play On. It was actually, the music was the music of Duke Ellington. Our choreographer was Mercedes Ellington, who was Duke Ellington's granddaughter. And it was actually based off of Shakespeare's, one of Shakespeare's plays was modernized and set in Harlem to all of that music. So that was my debut on Broadway. I spent, probably 16 years living in New York City. And it's so funny because the event world, my entree into it actually was, so in theater, we call this corporate theater, right? And in the dance world and the Broadway world, we call what you all do and what I now do corporate theater. And I actually started as a performer. So I would get hired, for different, 50, like Pepsi's 50th anniversary event in Hawaii. And they wanted a group to do a stomp performance. And so they hired all these percussionists, hello, that'd be me. And, they flew us out to Hawaii and we, did this huge rousing stomp adjacent performance. And that was really something that happened recurringly in my career as I was doing Broadway. So those two were always kind of side by side. I was actually a resident of New York when 9/11 happened. And I had booked the National Tour of Sophisticated Ladies, starring Mary Wilson, who recently passed away from the Supremes. She was one of the original Supremes. May she rest in peace. We were scheduled to start rehearsal September 12th. And so I was in Houston at my parents' house with my bags at the door, heading to the airport when the breaking news happened. And everything after that changed, literally everything. I'd always lived in New York. I'd always loved it. it resonated with me. That's where my heart was quickly taken over. But after that happened, I was a mother by that time as well. I was nervous. And that sounds like a strange thing to say because I lived in New York before Times Square looked like Disney. I lived in New York when it was still a little sketchy. It was a little sketch. It was a little sketch. But for the first time, I really just did not feel safe there. And so at that time, Broadway was moving out west to Las Vegas. And my thought was, I don't care where I do my Broadway show. I just want to do Broadway. So I packed up my car and I moved to a city I'd never even stepped foot in. I'd never been in Las Vegas once, not one day in my life. And I drove by myself from New York to Las Vegas with the idea of, landing a Broadway show because they were all coming out there in Las Vegas. And I just come off the national tour of Mamma Mia. So if there's any ABBA fans out there, if you change your mind, I'm the first in line. So I just finished doing that. And Mamma Mia was actually moving out to Las Vegas. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to Vegas. And then I got there and unbeknownst to me, they were hiring everyone out of New York. I really had not done my research. They were actually auditioning and hiring everyone out of New York and moving them out to Las Vegas. And so I got there and I couldn't get a job. And so I just started temping and looking for other work. And I think I did some nonprofit work. And I think I worked at Star Trek, The Experience, which is now defunct. But yeah, like if there was a job that would take me on, I did it. And then I looked up one day and KTNV ABC, it was the ABC affiliate in Las Vegas, was holding a contest, the Great Traffic Reporter contest. And I thought, I'm just going to go. Because I really didn't have any friends there yet. And it was still like pretty lonely. And I thought at the very least, I might meet some kindred spirits in line. And, I missed auditioning. That's the truth of it, is I missed auditioning. What a weird thing to say, because I hated it in New York, but I missed it. And long story short,
it's the adrenaline rush, right?
It's building the staircase as you jump out of the plane. It's 280 girls, it's 300 girls in a room, and they're going to hire 6 or 8. Like, you seriously have to be a little tapped in the head to sign up for that. But I loved it. And I auditioned, and the long and the short of it is I actually ended up getting the job. And so that was my entree into broadcasting. I literally was thrown in. It was trial by fire. And I had a wonderful news director. He is an icon in the broadcasting community. His name is Dick Tuniga. May he also rest in peace. Italian American from Chicago, smoked cigars. And he used to call me kid all the time. Kid, you got it. Kid, you got this. Kid, don't worry. I mean, he's just very affirming. And so, what I left out is at the same time I was auditioning for KTNV, I was also auditioning for a show called Stomp Out Loud. Now, everybody's heard of Stomp in New York, right? So Las Vegas was doing a Las Vegas version with all of these water elements in it. So it was Stomp like 2.0 with all these other things in it. And I actually got offered both jobs. And I called my mom because I didn't know what to do. The theater person in me really wanted to jump back into what I knew. And broadcasting was something altogether different. And quite frankly, I was intimidated. I actually said that to the general manager when he called and offered me the job. I remember asking him, Jim Prather, I was like, "Are you insane?" He said, "I don't think so." I said, "I don't know what I'm doing." He said, "That's okay. We'll teach you. You have all the other qualities that we want. And the public voted and picked you, and they want you and we want you." And so I figured, why not? I'd never done that before. And in very quick succession, I moved from traffic reporter, promoted to entertainment reporter, and promoted from entertainment reporter to weekend fill-in anchor. And all of that probably in about a year's time. So my trajectory at KTNV was pretty fast. So it was a wild ride.
That's amazing. And now what? So since then, are you still doing broadcast?
So I don't know if you guys remember, but the housing crash, right, across the country was very, very acute in Las Vegas. And so there was just no work. And I felt like it was just not the place for us to be anymore. And so I was looking for greener pastures. So I took my daughter and we moved to Los Angeles. And I actually ended up doing more broadcasting work. I did some hosting on camera work. And I actually did a 2-year project with the very infamous Joe Jackson, Michael Jackson's father. So we did a series of interviews. He's actually written an autobiography, and I don't know that it's ever been released. But our documentary and our interviews over about the span of 2 years were based off of the revelations and the things that he shared in that autobiography. And so I got to go to the Jackson estate, and I walked through the classrooms where all the Jackson's children were schooled, and where he and Catherine raised their family. There's like a little ice cream I mean, it's a really cool place. And Joe is actually, gosh, everyone I'm talking about is deceased, but he was actually quite lovely. And that was not what I expected. I really expected to go into it disliking him. And I don't know, when it was all said and done, he just kind of won me over. He has a beautiful smile, which I don't think anybody knows, because he's always grimacing and he's playing the tough guy role. And that's very intentional. But he actually had a beautiful smile. And over 2 years, I got to know him, his background, his story. We all know that he's, the father and the manager of the most successful entertainment family that's ever walked the planet. But he actually himself had a really, really interesting story and was quite musical himself as a child and had a lot of music in his background. So it only made sense that he would have injected that into his own personal family. So yeah, I was still doing on camera, hosting, talking, and of course, event work. There's a ton of people in the event industry that come from my world. A lot of the people that are calling the shows, that are directing, that are producing, come from the Broadway community. And so
they're so closely tied. I think that's what I've learned over my 2 years in my current role, is that they are so tied. And I look back to those years in middle school and high school where there was the theater people and the band people, and in a big-ish suburb school that I went to, it wasn't cool to do those things. And if I could have gone back and told myself to take any opportunity differently, or one thing that I should have done and I didn't, I wish I would have been involved in theater back then.
Really?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, theater kids are pretty cool. I went to the Performing Arts High School here in Houston, the same school that Beyonce went to, the same school that Chandra Wilson from Grey's Anatomy, went to. So yeah, I'm a hardcore theater geek. I come by it honest. But it was again, there's a through line in my life. And I use the word serendipity because I can't think of another one, but there's always been an alignment and a serendipity in my life that has carried me through all of these, I'll call them work stops, right? They've always sort of aligned and interconnected. And the event industry was just a natural adjunct for me. When I was out in Los Angeles, I of course ran into some of my New York colleagues, and what were they doing? They were doing events. And so I was thrust into the world of pharma. I probably did more pharma events in 2 years than you could shake a stick at. Akathisia, they're like terms that just roll off the tongue now after having done like 2 like hardcore years of pharma. And that was really cool too. There's a lot of freelancers, people from all over the country. We were traveling all over the place. A lot of the gigs were in Vegas, Chicago, DC. And so there was an opportunity to connect in the event industry on both like the large stage events, right? And then the smaller breakout rooms where you're like more one-on-one. And I love salespeople because it doesn't matter like how corny it is, like, because sometimes it can be corny, they buy into it. They are all in. They just want to win.
I was listening to a Grant Cardone book today, and salespeople are the easiest to be sold, the easiest to buy into, because we are people that have to get people to buy our products and buy into us. And so when someone can do it well to us, we're all in. I can spend money because I can get the money too.
I see you. I love it because they're in it to win it. Sometimes it would be a game show host. Sometimes it would be, just a straight prompter read or, a patient doctor interaction. It was always something new. And coming from theater, like that definitely aligned with like a personal way of working that I like. I like the new. Some people like really get tired of the new. I get tired of the same. I really do. I'm hardwired for the new.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are, especially in this day and age, to always want the new and to always want something new and more exciting. And I think that's why I resonated so much with this topic of like from performing to presenting because it is new. It's nothing we've never really kind of covered so far. And I mean, your energy is just um, engaging, and you can tell that you've done this before, not only on a in-person stage in an in-person environment, but you're fantastic at it virtually too, because we're doing this from me being in Minnesota and you being out in Houston, and you're just captivating me who you've spoken with before. So why is this so important to audiences out there right now?
In theater, we have a saying, play to the back of the room, play to the back of the house. And so there's actually 2 points of this page. One is not only are we trying to work virtually, but like you're really, and I don't want to minimize this, you're really speaking to an audience that is in the middle of trauma, right? Especially early days, that is struggling to make sense of something that they have no point of reference for. There's nothing that anyone living, it's happened before, but there's nothing that anyone living can recall about what we're experiencing right now. So we have no point of reference and the coping skills, like to address it and deal with it. And so virtual is really just like broadcasting, right? When you're doing traffic, you've got the screen there, you've got the prompter, right? And then you also have a green screen behind you, which is reflected into prompter. And when you're doing traffic, everything is reversed. So when you see it here, if you actually want to point to the right, you point to the left, everything is reversed. Then you have your IFB in your ear. There's somebody in your ear counting you in, counting you down. It's literally this, right? It is. And so virtual is that all over again. There's nearly identical systems between live broadcasting and virtual events. The one thing that was different for us as virtual hosts is recognizing that we don't really know who's out there, but we know they're going through it. So when they log in the morning, who knows what kind of night they had? Who knows what's going on in their world, what's going on in their home or in their parents' home? You know what I mean? Their minds are a million different places and a million miles away. So when that camera comes on, you have to play to the back of the room. Good morning. Hi, everybody. This is Wendee Lee Curtis, and welcome to today's event. They need it. Like people are sinking. People are sinking. And even though this is work, right? If you can make it fun and make them forget just for 5 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, then you've done the work of angels. Because this year was a heavy lift. It was 9 kinds of crazy and 6 kinds of nuts. And so in theater, we have a saying, it's play to the back of the house. That's play to the last seat in the theater. And so I think personally, to do this well, to do this successfully in the middle of a panorama, parallelogram, Panera bread, what are the kids also calling it? Panini. I have a Gen Zer in my house.
I was going to say, I think you would know better than I would.
She's called them all those things. You really have to, even if you're not feeling it, even if you've got your own stuff going on, you got to play to the back of the house, because I promise you're going to touch someone.
Yep.
You're going to touch someone. And in all the years I've been doing this, I've never really gotten like private emails from people. But in the course of doing this virtually, I got emails on LinkedIn from people at all the companies I worked for, and not the higher ups, like the attendees, like, thank you so much. It was just so nice. It was just so fun. Like people are struggling. And so this is a really easy way to wrap our arms around the people that are watching and like lead with love and energy and light. So that's a little woo woo. But
no, I love it, because I think also going back to a couple books and common themes that I'm reading and kind of brushing myself up on is that no matter what, everyone is a salesperson. They're either selling themselves, they're either talking about a company, they're talking about their product, they're selling themselves to the person sitting next to them when you offer a smile, some way or another. Everyone has this element of connection to sales. But now it's all virtual. All of it's done through a screen. And those tactics and those pieces that you use to usually connect someone to yourself, one another, the sales process, are a lot harder. And I think no matter if you're listening to this and you plan events, or you're looking for an amazing keynote speaker like Wendee, or if you're just on Zoom calls day in and day out, to remember to bring that energy. And like you said, I mean, what are some other tactics that outside of like that thought of speaking to the back of the room that work really well for people?
You'd be surprised. It's actually using people's names, right? It's such a small thing, but remembering and knowing and using people's names when you speak virtually is a really great way to bridge the chasm between you and the person on the other side of the feed, because we don't even have the like I didn't even have the luxury of seeing, some of the productions have like big screen and you can actually see the attendees and all that. It's a really odd sensation to send all of that out and not know how it's being received, and so you have to trust it, right? There's a certain amount of trust that you have to extend to others and gift to yourself, that you're making the connection. And one of the ways, it's such an easy thing, is someone's name. I might see somebody's name or a mention of it somewhere in the script, and some of the content is scripted and some of it is improvisational. And I would just throw in some, "Hey, Ted, so word on the street is," you know what I mean? And then the chat would just start rolling, my chat is blowing up. "All right, Ted, you might want to call HR," whatever, you know what I mean? Like, you want to keep it.
Whether there's a Ted in the room or not, just find a Ted, make a Ted.
Exactly. But so that's like a really small one. I don't know. I always find a way to sing a little. I'm such a weirdo though. But that's the theater girl in me. It really is. That's a theater girl in me. There might be a line or there might be something that's said. And so even if you don't sing, who doesn't love music?
Everyone loves music. I shouldn't say everyone doesn't love music. Everyone loves music.
They do, exactly. So adding, dropping a little bit of musicality somewhere, whether it's a musical reference or a little ditty or a little hum or a little do 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 do, right? Everybody knows that tune, right? Or dun 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 dun, right? Little music, their names, and just do whatever you have to do before that camera turns on to turn your light on. Whatever turns your light on, you have to do that before that camera turns on, because you have to light up everyone else.
I was just going to say, you can't be the only one that resonates with that light or that idea or that energy. It's going to speak to other people. And just the happiness and the kindness that you've projected through the minutes we've been together on this call and the previous minutes we've been together on another call are contagious. And whether it's just one-to-one on a podcast like this or speaking to an audience of who knows how many people virtually, you have the energy to touch so many people, and remember that and have that confidence too.
Yeah. And even though we're the people talking, the fourth thing I would say is listen hard, especially when you're doing chats between different people, or even in pre-production. Sometimes little gems, like I always have a notebook in pre-production. We're usually talking about the specifics around it, but invariably something personal will pop in somehow, or some little nugget or some little gem will come into the mix during pre-production, will get talked about, and I will find a way to interject that or add that improvisationally into the presentation. It makes it really, really personal, because this can feel highly impersonal. But when you add content like that, it lets people know, hey, I'm talking to you, right? I'm talking to you. It's you and me. I'm talking to you.
There are so many great takeaways from that in regards to performing and presenting and just bringing that energy in virtual events. And what has stood out to me between our conversations, as well as what I've seen with some of your work on LinkedIn, is the additional level you bring to the table with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know that's a piece of this puzzle you really wanted to touch on today, and how you've seen it playing out at the various tables that you've been at. Please share more.
So I've been very lucky. So this is a conversation that everybody's talking about in these good old United States of ours. Um, because I come from such an inclusive environment, theater, right? That is embracing by and large of marginalized communities. I think that there's just that expectation for me that I'm going to be accepted. And most of the people that I work with are repeats. You kind of get passed around a little bit, like a Snoopy doll. Once you start working with everyone, because people freelance a lot. And so you might be working with your friend who's doing it with production company A, and suddenly they're freelancing with production company B, and it's completely different content, et cetera, et cetera. And because those tend to be my touch points in terms of getting into the work, I personally don't feel tokenized. That's the thing that could potentially be problematic, right? We don't want to tokenize our colleagues or tokenize people in the industry, like, hey, look, we have a woman, or hey, look, we have someone that's differently abled, or like, that's not cool. I was actually doing a little bit of deep diving, and there's a company called McKinsey and Company, and they did some research. There were some proprietary data sets that they did on more than 350 companies in Canada, Latin America, the US, and the UK. And their findings were really, really clear that in the top quarter, the companies in the top quarter for racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have financial returns above their respective national industry medians.
Wow.
So I've been to a couple of meetings. There's a lot of time to Zoom right now. And one of the meetings talked so much about how industries are leaving so much money on the table by not being more intentional about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to say that, so this company found that it was 35% more likely that the financial returns were higher when we're talking about race and ethnicity. When we're talking about gender, it was 15% more, right? So you take those two things, gender, race, and ethnicity, right? And the return in theory is even higher. Forbes magazine actually just wrote this huge article back in March, and they were talking about how Hollywood is losing $10 billion a year because of the lack of specifically Black representation in their films. That it's $148 billion annual industry, and they could increase that revenue by 7%, which is $10 billion, if they just improved their Black representation on set and on screen. And so the math is really, really clear. Organizations, everyone's saying pivot. I'm a dancer, so I'm going to say step ball change. Organizations that do not step ball change into these ideologies are not going to survive. They're going to get left behind because race and gender are becoming financial differentiators in the entertainment industry, and I would conclude in the event industry as well, because they're quite similar, right? They're a junk deal, those two industries. And so it just makes good sense. It makes good sense to do it. I'll give you an example. So when I worked at KTMV ABC, that's market, I think it was market 45. So all the TV stations have a different market. It was market 45. And so our production team was pretty young, right? All of our producers and editors and all that kind of stuff were pretty young. And at the time, none of them were parents. I was the only one. So every morning you gather around the table and you have an editorial meeting. Your news director is there. That would be Dick Tunica. All the reporters, all the photographers, and all of the producers. At the time, there was a huge issue going on in Las Vegas. The Las Vegas school district was really struggling financially. They just didn't have enough money for enough teachers. like they were seriously on the struggle bus. And so I want to say it was like March, and they were saying, okay, starting in like May, it was like a 60 or 90-day turnaround. We're going to move to year-round schools. So for those of you who aren't familiar with that, it's tracks, right? It might be track A, B, and C. So if you were track A, you would go to school on a traditional schedule. If you were track B, you might come in 3 or 4 months and then go into the summer. And then if you were track C, you might come in the last quarter of it and go all the way through the summer and into the fall. First of all, Vegas is too hot to do school during the summer. So, that was insane anyway. But parents were picketing and protesting that they didn't want to do it. And someone at the table, I was pretty new at the station actually, and didn't feel comfortable. I was still learning. So I was doing a lot of listening. Y'all hearing this? I was doing a lot of listening. And some of the people at the table were like, what's the big deal? Like, why are these parents freaking out? And I kept waiting for someone to point out what I thought was really, really obvious. And nobody said anything. And finally, I couldn't take it. I raised my hand and I said, let me tell you what the issue is. I said, first of all, summer childcare is priced entirely differently than childcare is during the 9 months of the school year. Everything is set up for that. You have multiple camps to choose from. Like literally our entire school, our entire culture has a school year that starts in and around this date, ends in and around that date. And in these 3 dates, there's summer camps. What if you have 2 kids that are in different grades, different tracks? Traditional childcare for one kid might be $10 or $15 an hour. What parent has that? For 5 days a week, they have to go to work. I said, and they're not giving any notice. You know what I mean? Like they can't even try to get ready for this. I said, this is highly disruptive. And I think I was the only mom at the table, right? This isn't race. This isn't necessarily gender. This is situation, right? This is lived experience. I was the only mom at the table. When I started to explain it, they're like, oh. So they opted to do the story. And it actually became one of the highest rated stories we ever had. And our station was the only one to really do a deep, deep, deep dive on it. And it helped us win the ratings for that period. Now, what would have happened if I had not been at the table? That's not to say, oh, I'm so fabulous. No, what I'm talking about is who's at the table.
The perspectives, the people at the table, the inclusivity.
That's it. And change the entire perspective of what's created and produced. And that's what we do in this industry. That is what we do in this industry. If there is someone who is hard of hearing, they might be the only person sitting at the table to say, you know what, we need to close caption this. Or we need an ASL person. We need American Sign Language done for this event. If there's someone who's non-binary, they might say all of these pronouns are freaking me out. We need to fix these pronouns and make them inclusive. If it's a member of the LGBTQ plus community, it might be okay. So that you may not know this, but this is actually I don't know, incredibly discriminatory within the LGBTQIA plus community. Here's a better way. I see what you're trying to do, but that take is problematic.
Yes. I want to translate this into for our listeners who are typically event organizers, the ones who can make change on this and can help bring this to the table and have tangible action items. What do you see some of those being?
Step outside the box. Some of it is lived experience. And if you don't have it, then you have to seek it out. And I didn't grow from a tree. We're everywhere. You can't find us if you're not looking for us. There are plenty of people from marginalized communities who work within the events industry. Plenty. I know for me in my specific niche, I rarely, if ever, see another, this is me keeping it 100, Black woman who is the face of an event. She might be the keynote. She might be in the breakout room. She's definitely going to be the DE&I person, 100%. But what she's probably not going to be is the face of the event. Step outside of your comfort zone. I had someone say to me, because I asked, I've my trajectory throughout the event industry has grown and changed, right? When I first started, even with the people, and this is what I mean. It's not necessarily that there's malintent, but these are just established norms. Blow up the established norms. When I started, I was always a secondary, tertiary person in relation to the event. The host was always Caucasian and male, always. I never thought to question it. Not once. I was like, oh, I'm going to see this person because we work together all the time, right? They would hire us en masse in this one group and kind of like trot us around from event to event. And I thought nothing of it. Of course he's going to be the host. It never occurred to me that, well, why?
Why couldn't you be the host?
I'd be the host. Exactly. And so it's really about setting aside all these established norms, stepping outside of the box. The event industry isn't different from any other industry. We all have our cliques. We all have our favorites. Hey, when somebody loves me, I love that I'm their favorite, but I shouldn't do it all either. The emails that I got on LinkedIn from people were, the huge majority were from African-American women. It was so nice to see someone who looked like me as the face of the event. And it sends a signal, when it's done well and done right and not tokenized, it sends a signal that we're serious. The black boxes were nice, but we're leaving money on the table by playing the same card over and over again. You cannot win at poker playing the same card, right? You have a deck. You have a whole beautiful deck of cards and any number of strategies that can be utilized with this fabulous, diverse deck of cards. Play a different card.
And make it normal to play those different cards.
That's it. That's it.
I usually like to wrap up by saying, what are some final thoughts? But I feel like a final thought is like play all the different cards, but I'll leave it open to you. Any final thoughts?
No, that's it. There's so much richness. Like, who doesn't love a buffet? Point me to the person who doesn't love a buffet, and I'll point you to somebody that probably needs like mental health. Like, really, we all love a buffet. And the event industry has a wellspring of talent that looks like this beautiful, rich, tasty, delicious, varied buffet. Put a little something of everything on the plate, y'all. Put a little something of everything on the plate. And watch what happens. Watch what shows up for you. Half the time I don't know what's going to happen until it's happening. But when it's over, I'm just so glad I did it, and the client is just so glad I did it. So reach. We're out there. If people are looking for resources, there's Black in Events, there are Black in Events coalitions, Black event professionals, there are any number. There's Andrew Robbie, who speaks all the time on LinkedIn about these issues. Within the event industry, we're out there.
Specifically, if people want to get a hold of you, how can they reach out and learn more about the work that you're doing, or hiring you, or just connecting with you to share the love?
Well, you can go to my website, Wendee Speaks, or you can reach me through my agent at Outspoken Agency. Ask for Miss Tori, Miss Tori Mara. But yeah, I mean, it's much easier. It's a much easier fix than people might believe. So just blow up those established norms. Try something different. Because we're out here and we're ready to do the work. All of us. So let's do it. Let's do the work. Let's do our best work.
Wendee, thank you so much for sharing all of your background information, I feel like we just scratched the surface. We'll have to have you back and just catch up and speak on different pieces you're passionate about, because I know there's so much to your buffet that we didn't even get a chance to touch on. Thank you all for joining me for another episode of Meeting Minds. Please go ahead and follow us on Instagram, because our team likes to put up bite-sized pieces to get you just a wealth of knowledge and information from our guests like Wendee and all the other guests that we have on. And go ahead and subscribe, like the podcast. We'll put everything out on LinkedIn and share our links. And make sure you tune in next week for another episode of Meeting Minds. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige.
Thank you for listening to Meeting Minds. Meeting Minds. Brought to you by IDCOM Event Production, changing the world one audience at a time. Follow IDCOM Creative and Meeting Minds podcast on Instagram. And check out meetingminds.org to find show notes for this episode, past episodes, and inspiration. As always, please subscribe, leave a review, and tune in next week for another episode of Meeting Minds.